Hello everybody, welcome to our first Omnibook webinar. My name is Mitch Flohr. I'm one of the co-founders of Omnibook, which is a social writing platform you'll hear more about in a second. I'm sitting right now in Julian's chair, who's still on holidays. He's the second founder of Omnibook, and I just thought while he's away I'll just use this nice position next to the window for better light to actually make my first webinar. What we'll be covering today is we'll be creating a new book. We'll be uploading sample books from Google Docs, from Microsoft Word, or EPUBs, which you can download on the internet, or if you already have an existing EPUB, you can import your work into Omnibook via this way. We will then talk about how to structure the book, how to change it. We will be adding images, of course. We will be creating PDFs for print. We will be creating EPUBs for e-readers or for publishing on Amazon or Tolino or other platforms. We will also go into, which is what I call the social book, which is also the title of the slide, because book writing is not such a solitude experience as many people may think. It's a social event, and this is really what Omnibook is all about. So we'll be looking into how you invite people into helping you out on writing the book, to do proofreading or to actually contribute. Writing a book could also be something where actually a team comes together. They could be writing, for example, documentation for software together. They could be writing reports together, and this is really the power of Omnibook. A few things about this webinar. If you have any questions, please, on your website you'll find the possibility to ask them. I will collect them. They'll pop up here on my second screen. And if they actually fit what I'm talking about right now, I will answer them immediately. Otherwise, I'll just save them for later where we have a Q&A session. I think that the presentation will be about 20 to 30 minutes, so we'll have 10 minutes at the end to actually talk about questions from your side. Another thing I wanted to start with is to give you a brief background of Omnibook. Omnibook is a platform which is available online on omnibook.pro. This is the home screen. You can register here. I will show this later in the webinar. And the software that Omnibook is driving on is called BookType. And BookType is actually the company we set up last spring. BookType.pro is the URL. I'll just go to the homepage here, and it's got the title Everything a Book Can Be. And this already encapsulated what we also want to achieve with Omnibook. We want to give BookType and all the functionality to virtually everybody. May that be a single author, a small publisher, a group of people writing reports or something. BookType has already been around, and that's why if you go to the Who's Using site here, you can actually find a couple of clients that we have listed, and it's a longer list. I won't go through all of them, but I want to actually talk to the two tops here, mostly because I think they really encapsulate what I will go through later in Omnibook. There's one company based in Germany called Books on Demand. It's the European leader for publishing and self-published technology. They started with a lot of print-on-demand services and reanimating back archives from publishers or creating new books as a print-on-demand service. And then they also opened their services to allow authors to self-publish electronic books. And they are using BookType, what's also Omnibook, mostly in the sense of that this is a place where one author can sign up, can actually go into the editor, create a book, and show this, basically then publish it with their service on all the major platforms around the world. So what they've done is they're really just focused on this functionality of creating a valid digital publication using BookType or Omnibook technology to allow an easy way to get this book into the world. And another example of the use of BookType is Amnesty International, which is basically, which often allows me to say that everybody knows at least one book which is produced by BookType, which is the annual report of Amnesty International, which is translated into many languages, and we have built a custom version of BookType for them where the collaboration aspect is really in the foreground of the work. So yes, they create print-ready PDFs which go straight to the printer. The same technology I'll show you in Omnibook later, but also it means that all the translators, the editors, the contributors, they all work together on each of this book and each translation of the books. There's a lot of kind of discussion inside the book. There's a lot of comments which come from this from the translators or from the people who write the original text, which sometimes, for example, the original text is in English. Sometimes it's important to actually specify in a comment in the text if this is a male or female character, because other languages would need to know that, and the translators need to know in order to make sure that they have the right grammar around it. So these are two of our bigger clients, and this is all for BookTub. If you have any questions, I'll just bring this up again and I'll show it at the end as well. mitch.floor@omnibook.pro is my email address, and you can reach out and ask me anything anytime when I'm awake. So let's go back to Omnibook. First thing I do is, of course, I would register here, which is the registration form. I have already registered, so it's fairly straightforward. I just use my mitch.author, which was basically done here for the presentation, and I start as a single author. And what I'll do now as well is, in order to give you a little bit more room, I will just stop my camera for now, so this goes full screen for you. Okay. So after I logged in, I will basically see the Omnibook homepage, so to speak. You can see people who have just joined. You can see books which are in progress. This might be confusing to some because they might not want to share their books, but these are all books where people have decided to share them, so they come up here. If you are logged in as an administrator of the platform, which you won't be able to, but you'll get a sneak preview because my other account I'll show later is a administrator's account. You can of course see all the books, all the users, because frequently people ask you to make changes or do something with these books. There's also groups, which I'll get into a little bit later. A group, the idea is that a couple of authors can come together and work on a couple of books. As an author, you can create a book, you can create a group, and you can add books to a group. I'll show how that works later as well. And there's the recent activity stream, which means activity that's been happening for public books recently is coming up here. So first thing I want to do is, of course, I'm here to create a book. So if I do create a book, I can just click on the create button. I can give it like a title. My first book is here, exclamation mark. I can then in 5 steps add a little description. I just copy and paste something in here. We don't need that now. I can choose license. That's very important because in the metadata of your book, if and when you publish it, this will actually mean what other people can do with it. There's a couple of licenses we have provided, which are Creative Commons license, which give authors the possibility to not free all their content, but allow a certain amount of sharing, which can sometimes be useful if, for example, you do documentation for software, that you actually want this to be freely available and people feel confident that they're allowed to pass it on without infringing on any copyright laws. There's also different licenses here from the from the open source world, MIT license, and public domain means that this basically has it's just free for anyone. Public domain could mean that it's an old novel, which is what we'll be going into, a text which is by now the copyright has expired, or you can actually set your work to be in the public domain. That means that you have no more control over what will be happening. Or if you're unsure of how to use the license, you can actually just keep it in the beginning to say all rights reserved, meaning that everything you contribute will be copyrighted by you. If at a later stage you work with other people, there is a history in the book which allows you to see the changes that everybody has made, making it easily possible to track back to contributions from other authors in your book. Let's stick to all rights reserved for now. I can then add an image. This image will show up in the list of books on the website. I don't have anyone here right now, and I can then decide in the last step if I want to make this book public. Initially hide from others means that I can change this later, but right now as I start writing and I finish here, I have a book. I can hide it from others so I can work on this alone. If it's hidden, I can still invite people to contribute. but it just means that the public or people who are logged into the platform are not in a position to see this. Once you decided to make it public, you can actually change it later. You see here now there's a couple of possibilities to edit this book, to view a draft of the book, which is empty. I can edit the book info, which allows me to change the description. I can upload an image here, change the license, and also change the status or the visibility. I can delete the book, or I can view the full book also on the website, meaning that it's not separated by chapters, but in one long text. What I'll do now, this might be confusing to you, but you'll understand in a second, is I'll delete this, because an easier way to start a book for this webinar is to actually import a book. So to import a book, I decided to go with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, and you can find a free EPUB version on the Gutenberg platform. The reason I decided to do this, because I want to start a collaborative book project, which we will call Alice's Adventures in Zombieland. You know, I'm sure you have come across this book recently that made some headlines, which was the, here it is, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. And similarly, I decided that just for this demonstration purposes, we'll just take the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and we'll turn it into Alice's Adventures in Zombieland. If you think this is a great idea, I have to disappoint you, somebody else has already done this, but it's just a very intriguing idea, so I'll stick to it. So first thing I do is I just download an EPUB without images. I click on it, it will save it here, and I will now have it here. You can see I tried this earlier to make sure it works. I'll now have it downloaded in my downloads folder. Now I go back to Omnibook, I import the book, I select the book from the downloads folder. Initially, Microsoft only shows me Microsoft documents, so I just switch to all documents, pick up the EPUB, and it's now asking me if I want to give it as a title. So this will be Alice's Adventure in Zombieland. Initially hide from others, you bet I do, because I have no idea how this is going to turn out. And now I import it. It's uploading, converting, and here it is. So first thing we can do now is we just check out and see the draft of what we imported. What you'll note here is that not all the chapters which are in the book have been recognized properly by Omnibook on import. The reason is that the Gutenberg platform is not really following the EPUB standards. So some of the things we also do with Omnibook or BookType is to actually improve the quality of EPUBs by using this editor that really delivers validated formats for ebooks. So in order to do this, let's just go back to my dashboard. And I'll show you the first important thing. I will just go into Edit a Book, and we will be splitting the chapters which were not recognized on import because they were not in the original book, but that will be in the text itself. So let's take a look at, for example, the first chapter here. These are the 4 chapters that were recognized. This is the table of contents, which is the main dashboard for your navigation. And you can see that you can change the order of chapters easily just by dragging and dropping them around. So if I just open the chapter, I will now be in the book editing view. This is the book as it's been imported. And you can see that this is usually the way Gutenberg works is they scan the book and then they read the text into they transfer the image into text, which means that, for example, here you can see there's a couple of lines which have line breaks, which were in the original book, but I can actually fix this to make sure it looks better. Also, you can see down here that, for example, chapter 1 is just part of the initial scanned materials, which of course it shouldn't be. And in order to bring a little bit of order into my book, I will now learn how to split a book like a long chapter into sub-chapters. This is not only important to actually fix an EPUB which is not accurate, but I will go into converting books from Google Docs into Omnibook or importing into Omnibook from Google Docs later. And there also you have the possibility to manually break the longer document into chapters. So fairly simple: insert, in the book editor, split chapter, and then already it suggests that this line where I just said this is where it should break it into chapter becomes the new chapter title. Split chapter, and you will see that this is now just this initial part of the chapter as it was imported. Here I can go back to the table of contents, and I see now that here's also the chapter down the rabbit hole. One thing that you need to then manually change is you need to actually get rid of the original part of the text, which I decided is also the chapter title. Imagine you have a long piece of text and you decide, oh no, here needs to be a chapter break. You don't want the original text to be deleted, so it keeps all the text and the formatting intact, but it just basically says that the new title is on top and this is just part of the body. I will delete it now, and you will see that this also brings us to a new feature. I delete it, and then because of the way in which the original EPUB is structured, this then becomes the subheadline. You can see this here. This is the paragraph formatting where I can have different design, not designs, but different presets for the individual paragraphs. So we don't want this to be subheading, we just want this to be normal text, and now basically this is fixed. Let's do another one just for practice. Here is the chapter 2, so insert, split chapter, the title is what we want. That's correct. If I now go to the table of content, I see that this has also been separated properly. Same issue, I delete this, turn this back to normal text, and this is my book. I can now save this while I'm working at it, and when I save something, we will see that later it actually creates a history file, so you can actually see back in over time how these chapters have been developed. Another thing I want to show you is the layout version. Currently, basically, I'm using the stuff that's been imported with the EPUB. There's no real design to it. It's called the custom style. I can change the different aspects of the page layout. I can align left, center, right. I can take the paragraph settings into different designs and so on. What we have done is we actually prepared a couple of designs which we believe help you to make nicer books faster. One of them is, for example, academic, where we have the possibility to write longer reports. This is using a very modern font, and it gives you an idea here in the editor already what the print and what the EPUB will look like. There are different ideas of, for example, reports. This is a more elegant way of styling your book, but we also made something, for example, the fairy tale, something which is closer to the idea of a novel. You can see here that this is using a different kind of font, works really well on smaller pages, and also here historical fiction, which makes this actually look like a book that you found somewhere in the attic, which is possibly 300 years old, and if you open this you might start an adventure you regret. We don't know, this could be actually the beginning of your book. So there's a couple of styles. Some of them are a little bit more out of the ordinary. For example, the typewriter is really trying to look like you wrote this thing on an old typewriter. There's also something called artsy bold, which is also a little bit more challenging. What's important at this stage for you to understand is that with one click you can redesign the entire book. And this redesign in the browser gives you a feeling of what the book will look like. And of course, depending on the page size, the print PDF will not look identical to what we have here on the screen, but it will basically be used the same font sizes and styles, and I'll show you what that means later on. Just for our little zombie book with Alice, I would retire to go with the fairy tale, of course. So this is the fairy tale book. So this is the design tab on the left. Let's just briefly go through all the features that we have here in the article, sorry, in the editing screen. Firstly, we can have design here. We have something like that's called notes. This is really simple. You just write stuff here and save it. This is almost like a post-it area for authors. If you collaborate, if you click on here, you can get instructions or questions from other people later. We also have something which we go into later, which is the chat room. So as I said in the beginning, the book is a social event. So we believe that a book needs to have a chat room. Here I can actually chat in real time with other people inside the book. Who is in the book? We only have one person now. I'm a single author, but I'll invite somebody later. All of these people will actually then show up here in the chat room. And also we have the chapters, of course. These are, it's like a quick switch between individual chapters. I want to go, for example, here, just for the fun of it. Let's just go and split this chapter 2. Here is the new title, insert, split chapter. Oops, for whatever reasons this didn't work. Might have been this weird apostrophe. No. Okay, I'll look into this later. So this basically brings us back to the table of contents. What we've done so far is we actually import a book, structured it. I showed you how you can change the order of things. But another important thing that Omnibook allows you to do is to actually structure the entire book in sections. Why is this a good idea? Just assume, for example, you would do a reader of short stories or of scientific articles, or you would do a manual for software, then there will be different sections. For example, how to install the software, first steps into the software, how to expand the software, and so on. In the case of Omnibook, for example, I could have a section saying how to start and import a book. Second section would be how to invite authors to contribute, and so on. So if I add a new section, let's just say this, introduction. So this is where my section is now. I will basically make Alice in Wonderland. Oops, this just disappeared now. Okay. This shouldn't have happened. Let's just go back to see if this is a glitch in the interface, or if this is really something that was deleted from the book. So no, there's just a glitch in the interface. So you can see now that the introduction, which I can open and close, has Alice's Adventures in Wonderland as a content, so to speak. If I close this, I can see that, okay, this is inside the book. Let's make another section which we call Book 1. Let's assume this will be a compendium of different books. Let's open it. This might have been what happened earlier, that I had this thing closed and dropped it in there, and then it looked like it ran off the screen. So this is a way of structuring content inside a book, which will also be reflected in your ebook and the print PDF when you create it on export. Another thing that we talked about these things, another thing which are important about the overall information and stuff about the book is, for example, media. You have a tab here where there's nothing at the moment, where we will later see all the images that we contribute. We have a cover manager. This is important. If you create an EPUB, the cover will be included in the book. Also, we have the possibility to export a PDF which is for screen reading, which can also have a cover at the front of the book. And there's the book history. You can already see that a lot of stuff has been logged here. I can take a look at this later, like explaining to you how you can see the differences. I'll do that when I have another author contributing. And here we have settings. The settings for the book is like the control panel. This might take away from the fun of writing a book right now, but later on, once you finish, this is really important. There is book metadata available here. This will be the way in which books are filed for sales. So if you want to get the stuff into the bookshelf, metadata really is the key to make your work visible. So be sure to, you can actually Google this, like read up on this. It's really important to fill in the metadata. There's also additional metadata which we have contributed. This is going beyond what the usual XML standards require. And also, if you, for example, are your own publisher, you might actually add separate fields yourself, which you need in order to structure the content of your publishing activities. So let's go back to the table of contents. We have everything in place here, and now let's just, for the fun of it, let's publish a book. You can see in the book export that there is a variety of settings. We haven't activated all the stuff that we can do with book type. Omnibook is a subset of things right now. So it's the printer's PDF, that's the PDF that goes straight to the printer. Screen PDF, which is often used for proofreading. Some people still want to print the stuff out, so you can actually have a separate screen PDF. As I mentioned earlier, this will also have a cover attached to the PDF, so somebody opening this up in their iBooks or something will see the cover of your work. EPUB is the format which is used by pretty much every electronic reading device but Kindle, but we also provide the Mobi device, which is for Kindle. So if, for example, I now go to the printer's PDF and I'll export my book, you will see that it will already take care of all the fonts and the pre-formatting I did in the layout, but it won't actually look as good as it will look in a second. So going here, you can see that there is the front meta, which is usually like a title with just title and author. I then can go to the page 3, which is on the right hand side, again Alice's Adventure in Zombieland with author Mitch. Then there is the impressum, and then the table of contents, and then comes the first section, introduction, and then the content of this. And also later on, book 1, this is the second big section that we started, which will have the individual chapters. You can see now this looks really very small. The reason is simply that we have used a fairy tale theme, which was developed for reading, and actually put it onto an A4 sheet of paper. So this would be perfectly alright if it's printed out for somebody to proofread, but the printer PDF, other than the screen PDF, we want to be actually fitting into the size that the printer wants. So this is where settings come in. I can actually just pick from a couple of very common settings, which for now US letter, for example, its default setting as a European company, which we have settled for A4. Let's, for example, take the US trade format, which is kind of a mid-sized book. It's actually my favorite size. It's a little bit too big actually for a novel, but I like working with it. So here we have the possibility to say top margins, side margins, bottom margins, and gutter. Gutter is what's basically in the if you think about a print PDF, of course they are facing pages. So it's not left and right, it's gutter and side margin. So gutter is the part which is close to the spine of the book, and side margin, which I'll make a little bit bigger, just for show, actually I'll just make this 4 centimeters, is the stuff on the right hand side, or sorry, on the outer side. And then header and footer, I can switch them on and off. For example, we are using, in the footer we're using now the page numbers. I can switch these off if you want to, but this doesn't make a lot of sense unless you do handouts, which you want to have like each individual page, or each chapter is just a one-pager. You get this printed, you don't want the page numbers on there, then you can switch them off here. Extra stuff, crop marks, you know, these are the little crosses which allow the printers to really place your page properly on their output. I'll just leave this out now. And there's additional styling. This is the typical thing of, unless you know what you're doing, don't do it. We have documentation on booktype.pro. You will find more information about how to style books, but this is really just the masterclass and not in our webinar. So now I changed this printer setting. Let's just make another one. Export the book again. It does take a little time, of course, because it's running through each of the pages to calculate the page numbers, then creates a table of contents for the front matching these page numbers. So it's not something that just happens with one click. It does take its time. You can see now that in the screen, of course, the image, the paper size seems to be the same, but it's already a different feeling to read. You can see here now also how there is this back and forth Page 9 is an uneven number, so this is on the right hand side. The left here would be the spine of the book, and this is the margin of the page. You can see how this jumps back and forth. And yeah, you can already see how also this becomes way more readable if you just match the theme with a nice paper size. Okay. So this, where are we now time-wise? Already half an hour into the webinar. Let's just briefly go back into our book and invite somebody to join us. Actually, I mentioned earlier, so I don't want to forget about this. If you want to import from Google Docs, I prepared something here in Google Docs. The way to do this is actually using the import possibility of importing Microsoft Word documents. If you have a finished Google document, make sure that all the chapter titles are heading 1, like this one. If they are, they will be automatically recognized and split into individual chapters. And then if you just download as Microsoft Word docx, it will, and again I tried this earlier just to be sure, it will save this as a Microsoft Word document. What I'll do now is I'll just delete this Alice's Adventure in Zombieland, because it really is deleted. This is the security that you just make sure that you know what you're doing. I'm deleting my book. I'm now importing another book. I take the sample I just downloaded. I will give this the title again, initially hide from others, import. Same thing, Word document has been imported. Go straight into editing it. It's loading. There are 3 chapters in the sample. I only have the 3 chapters, and as it opens you can see again that it just took the raw material in, and I'm just basically going to find another novel classic, for example. This is a slightly more modern font but still a serif font, and now I can basically go into creating the settings again. Let's actually take an even smaller format than US Trade. A5 for example, or this is like a very common novel format. Just make the side margin 3 centimeters. Save this again, and the print as PDF will now spit out the same book again. Sorry, smaller book, and with a different design. You can see how quick it actually goes from importing to creating a print PDF. Here you see that the table of content does not have the sections. We haven't made sections, but you can see that the book itself looks, I really like it, looks very much like a novel. Okay, so last but not least, so far I see there are no questions coming up. This is either because I lost you or because my explanation is just so illuminating that there's no room for questions. So let's just go back to one thing, is inviting somebody else. I'm going back to the home page, go into my dashboard, go into editing this book, and now the idea would be that I'm inviting somebody else. This somebody else will also be me. So let's just load and go to roles in the settings, and now I can assign somebody. This is my admin account. Can assign this admin account as editor-in-chief. So now I save this, and you can see in the metadata, also not in the metadata of the book, but in the settings of the book, I have assigned Mitch as an editor-in-chief. That means that is invited to contribute to your book and has full permission to edit and manage your book. So let's just take a look at the this is the account of Mitch, Omnibook admin. You can see now that So far, this Mitch guy had no idea. He's got a couple of books here himself, but he has no idea that this book even existed. Next thing he knows, Alice's Adventure in Zombieland actually pops up on his dashboard, participating books. I'm invited as an author here. Let's just dive straight into this. First thing you should notice is that book type does not support, consciously not support concurrent editing, so no two people can write in one chapter at the same time. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is related to a copyright issue, like really tracking who's done what, but also the other thing is that actually authors have said that they appreciate, hang on, there's a question coming in a second. Authors really appreciate to have solitude. They don't want, like, concurrent editing is fine if you just have some meeting notes and stuff, but to really work on a book, it's possibly not the best way to go about this. So Mitch super users invited and can join the book now. I'm reading the Down and the Rabbit Hole, and let's just take a look at what the original author sees. I want to go back to the table of contents, and they can see, oh look, Mitch has already joined the book. He's writing here right now. Let's just take a look and see, oh, Mitch joined, timestamp here, and I can now just actually say, hi, I am a bit embarrassed, sorry, about the title, but wait for the cover, exclamation mark. So you can see that there's a little icon of the faces there. And if I just go back to, you can see here now that Mitch in the chat actually got a notification that somebody is chatting, and then he can read these things like, oh yeah, a bit embarrassed about it. And of course I would say that because I was just invited. I'm flattered to be invited, so I need to flatter back and say the title is awesome. Exclamation mark, send. And I forgot to say, like, show me the cover. And this is possibly the last thing we'll be able to cover right now. As the owner of the book, I will now go to the cover manager and I will upload a cover. The cover that I showed you earlier is my title. This title is for the EPUB, for the ebook, and screen PDF. Upload the cover, and it's approved. The possibility here is you could have somebody who's just putting stuff online, but it needs to be approved to make sure that all the copyright is cleared and so on. And once I've done this and I go back to publish, I can just go to the screen PDF. Also has these 5 steps, but they're slightly different. Here, for example, I can now pick this image. Save, and if I create a screen PDF, it will actually use the cover. Same thing for the EPUB. Now from all the files which I have uploaded under cover, which was only one, I can pick this also to say this is the cover for the EPUB. If I now create those 2 at the same time, they should come up with the covers. The EPUB I have no means of showing you right now because I don't have an e-reader inside my screen. I'll just show you something about this in a second. So here's the screen PDF. Let's just take a look at this briefly. And you can see that my beautiful cover is now on the top. This is again a different paper size. This is A4, so this goes straight out of the printer for people to look at for proofreading or something else. Regarding the EPUB, I briefly want to show you this on our blog. If you go to booktype.pro, under news, you will find a couple of interesting articles regarding the software behind Omnibook. And one of them is about the layouts for the books. Here you can see that what I explained and how you can switch, but also here's an example of how the designs and the fonts and the spacing is also carried into the e-readers. This is a Kindle device from Amazon. This is a Tolino device, very common in Germany. And the idea there is that you can use, of course, in the e-reader custom fonts if you want, but if you switch to publisher fonts, you will get the same spacing that is similar to what you get as a print output. This is using, I think, the academic theme, so this should be the Roboto font. Here's the chapter title, a little spacing, text flows over, and here's a quote, for example, which is styled with a little bar here on the side. So now we're running out of time, just 1 minute. I will just answer 2 of the questions that we got. How much does Omnibook cost to use? Yes, good question. What you'll see if you start as an author yourself, currently after you created one book or imported one book, it says no additional books can be created. There's all features for this book, but currently we have limited it to 1 book per author. You can finish your work, delete it, and then start another book, no problem. But we are planning to actually introduce later this year or early next year the possibility to upscale your account. So if you like it, if you want to work on books parallel, let's say you're a small publisher or you write documentation for software, you might want to just have all the books in front of you, make changes, put them out for printing or for digital distribution as you update them, then you will be able to actually upscale. But right now it's a full feature set, but limited to 1 book. And possibly we're already a little bit over time, but one other question is, what other formats can I import? Can I make a custom design? Currently, what you can import, let me delete this again. Oops. Currently you can import only the EPUB or DocX format. We could extend this. There were questions about importing for InDesign, for example, so on, but we realized that one of the things that DocX is really good for is like converting from A to B. Almost every software can export to DocX. Doesn't matter if you use OpenOffice or whatever. And so we stuck to this as what we think is a very universal way of importing. Also means that authors who have already written work in Microsoft Word can just import it here and, for example, share it with an editor. So you don't need to send back and forth to your DocX formats. You can just basically import it, have somebody to edit it, and then, which I'll show you in another webinar, use the history tab to actually see the changes. You can even comment in the text and so on. EPUB is something which we have included because there's a lot of publishers who use EPUB formats, but they're not valid. So in order to actually make valid EPUB, which we can use for all platforms out there, Omnibook is a great way to fix stuff. As I've shown you with the Gutenberg formats, import it here, then split it. You can add images, crop images, and so on, and then make sure that you export with the right fonts, with the right layout in a valid format. So currently these are the only 2 formats we support. I'll leave this here. And thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can mail me, mitch.floyd@omnibook.pro. We will also upload this screencast to the GoToWebinar page, so I'll be able to see this. And I made a list of things I wanted to cover, and I went about halfway through this. When I started, I thought, oh man, I'll be running out of things to say after 10 minutes, but now it's 40 minutes later and I still have stuff to share. So we might do another webinar fairly soon, where I will focus on more of the social aspects of writing books. We already invited another author. We want to look at the history for track changes. We want to look at comments in the book, which is really important. They work pretty much like Google Docs comments. So these are all elements which make your writing experience a bit bigger than you sitting on a desk with a computer, which actually make them a social event. So I'll leave this here and looking forward to hear from you. And yeah, keep on writing. Bye.